Welcome, electronic video guests. Today's offering is our 2026 college football preview, which will culminate in our prediction of the 12 teams most likely to make the college football playoff. Not the 12 best teams, but the 12 teams most likely to make the playoffs. Some of these 12, of course, benefit from easier schedules than teams that are better. All right, we don't want to waste any time. Let's jump right into it. Let's take a look. First up, the Atlantic Coast Conference. Of the four power conferences, I rank the ACC as number 3. And I'm predicting only one ACC team will get in the playoffs. If they get two teams, that means the SEC and Big Ten did not have 4 teams go through their season with 2 losses or less. But one thing I'm pretty sure of, Miami was going to get that ACC playoff spot. They are head and shoulders above the rest of the league. It's a spot they secured with their last-minute transfer portal tampering with fellow conference member Duke. They bought the Blue Devils quarterback Darian Mensah. That filled the one big hole on Miami's roster, getting a starting QB. Miami also has a dark horse Heisman candidate at running back, Mark Fletcher. They lost some good players on the defensive line, but they turned around and poached Missouri star pass rusher Damon Wilson, so they should be once again set on defense. That's the modern age of college football. If you got some holes on rosters, you just you just go to some donor, get you a stack of money. You go to another team and you put a hole on their roster by buying their players. All right, if there are going to be a second ACC team to make the playoffs, it will likely be the winner of the September 26th game between SMU and Louisville. And I got to favor SMU in that game based on quarterback play alone. Louisville had to settle in the transfer portal for Ohio State third-string QB Lincoln Kienholz. I've seen him in some mop-up duty a few games in the Cotton Bowl a couple of years ago against Missouri. Let's just say I don't think too much of him. SMU's quarterback Kevin Jennings is not without his own flaws, but he's also had some winning moments in some fairly big games, and he gives SMU the edge over Louisville. Over Louisville and their terminal face-painted head coach, Jeff. Now, Clemson might have better overall talent than SMU and Louisville, but their quarterback is a complete question mark. Christopher Vezina has been riding the bench for 3 years behind Cade Klubnik, barely getting into any games, and you have to wonder how much he brings to the table. The rest of the ACC is very forgettable. The only thing worth paying attention to is the James Franklin experiment at Virginia Tech. Franklin, as you all know, could never win a big game at Penn State, and he was run out of town after last season's horrendous collapse. Penn State was the preseason number 2 ranked team, and they completely fell apart with a mid-season 6-game losing streak. Now, Franklin is a blowhard who can sell pie in the sky to recruits, so he'll probably elevate Virginia Tech's talent level to guarantee 9 wins every year in the Velvet Soft ACC, but that's as far as he'll ever get. One other ACC note, we're going to be pulling for Stanford's new quarterback, cancer survivor and former Michigan quarterback Davis Warren, the walk-on who beat Ohio State in that massive 2024 upset. All right, speaking of the Big Ten, let's switch over to the Big Ten, which I believe is the toughest of the 4 power conferences. It's produced the last 3 national champions. You got 3 true heavyweights at the top of the Big Ten. Oregon, Ohio State, and Indiana. Indiana probably has the easiest schedule of the three heavyweights, and they have an absolutely loaded defense that might be even better than last year's national championship defense. The only question is in the secondary. They lost a couple of good players, particularly D'Angelo Pons, but their defensive line and linebackers are a wrecking crew. Although with all these recent court rulings about when the fifth year eligibility starts, there might be one or two players for Indiana. Their status, I think, is, as of right now, is still up in the air. I'm sure they can find some local court, though, to sneak them onto the roster. So that Indiana defense is going to be unbelievable this year. Going to be very tough to score on them. Now, their latest transfer quarterback is Josh Hoover, coming over from TCU. If Curt Cignetti can solve his turnover problem, you will once again see Indiana, former football doormat, back in the playoffs with a very good chance of defending their title. It'll also be interesting to see if Cignetti can light a fire under transfer portal pickup Nick Marsh, talented wide receiver who pouted most of last season at Michigan State. Now, Oregon probably has the fewest question marks of any team in college football. I'm actually picking them to win the Big Ten, even though Dan Lanning hasn't won a big game in his career. Dante Moore would have been a first-round pick, but he chose to come back for one more year. He's got plenty of guys to throw the ball to, particularly Decorian Moore. Jordan Davison is back to run the ball. There are some whispers about a possible injury. Nobody really knows, but it doesn't seem that serious. But if he does miss anything other than a couple early season games, then running back depth could be a problem. Oregon has a great defensive line returning, and they added one of the better safeties, Coy Parrish, from the transfer portal. And of course, Ohio State absolutely loaded on offense and defense. Julian Sayin is a fine game manager at quarterback, not the strongest arm. He did not really step up against Indiana or Miami at the end of last season, but he's certainly good enough to get the Buckeyes into the playoffs once again. He'll be throwing to another stacked group of wide receivers, highlighted by the much-hyped Jeremiah Smith. Now, the interesting thing about Ohio State is they dumped Chip Kelly as their offensive coordinator. I guess he was Ryan Day's scapegoat for the poor offensive performances in their losses to Indiana and Miami. So Day brought in NFL retread Arthur Smith to run their offense. So now Ohio State has Arthur Smith running the offense and Matt Patricia running their defense. That tells you exactly how much talent the Buckeyes have when they can win almost every one of their games with these two NFL failures calling the plays. Anyway, I see Ohio State, Indiana, and Oregon making the playoffs. I believe the Big Ten will get a fourth playoff team, and that will most likely come from USC, Michigan, Washington, or Penn State. Penn State has by far the easiest schedule. It will be a crime for them to lose more than 2 games, but I believe they will. I'm not a big fan of Matt Campbell. He's another celebrated coach who's never won a big game, and I absolutely do not believe in the quarterback Campbell brought over from Iowa State, Rocco Becht. He is mediocre at best and at times a liability. I don't understand why they chased Ethan Grunkemeyer out the door for Becht. They would have been better off encouraging him to stay. Now, USC and Michigan have very, very tough schedules. They both play Indiana, Oregon, and Ohio State and Penn State, while Michigan also has to play Oklahoma and USC has to play Washington. Washington only has to play Indiana and Oregon. And if they win that October 3rd game in LA against USC, they could sneak past Michigan or USC and grab the number 4 spot from the Big Ten. Michigan season, once again, they need to beat Oklahoma in week 2. If they win that one, they'll be in the playoff hunt the whole season. And that game and Michigan season primarily rides on the development of quarterback Bryce Underwood, who had a very disappointing freshman season. Also, Iowa could also be a surprise, but we don't know about their new quarterback, who should be Jeremy Hecklinski. If it's Hank Brown, you can forget about Iowa. He's terrible. Hecklinski is a smaller type quarterback, but he's kind of like a Stetson Bennett type. If Kirk Ferentz can get any sort of similar production out of him, look out. Iowa will be a lot of trouble. They have a very manageable schedule with only 2 tough games, Michigan and Ohio State. None of the other Big Ten teams are worth wasting any time on. The only other interesting story is Chip Kelly landing on his feet at Northwestern as their offensive coordinator. His quarterback this year will be Michigan State transfer Aiden Childs, who had a very disappointing 2025 season, lost his starting job, and got Jonathan Smith fired. Childs and Kelly are what we might call demographic polar opposites. I would not be shocked if Childs once again loses his starter's job. All right, that takes care of the Big Ten. Let's take a look at the Big 12, which is by far the weakest of the Power 4 conferences. Texas Tech's going to easily win this conference, almost 100% certain to make the playoffs. Texas Tech is, of course, the current most hated team in college football after the Brendan Sorsby gambling fiasco. I don't think Tech is one of the 12 best teams in the country, but take a look at their schedule. Look at this schedule of cupcakes. They should not lose a single game. That is unbelievable. Texas Tech, that is a great. What team would not want to play that schedule? The next tier in the Big 12 consists of Houston and the 2 Utah Mormon teams. Then there's a big drop off for the rest of the league. Although it seems like every year in the mediocre Big 12, one of the bottom feeders breaks through. This year, the bottom feeder is probably going to be the bottom feeder breakthrough is probably going to be Arizona, Arizona State, or Oklahoma State. Oklahoma State ought to be renamed North Texas after they hired the North Texas coach, and he brought half the North Texas team with him, including star QB Drew Mestemaker. Now, Iowa State, of course, was decimated by transfers when Matt Campbell went to Penn State. They will now join Colorado as a league punching bag. One possibility, BYU could steal a second playoff spot for the Big 12 if they manage to upset Notre Dame at home on October 17th. If they win that game and go into the Big 12 title game with only one loss against Texas Tech, they could sneak into the playoffs no matter the outcome. Though they would still probably need either the Big Ten or SEC to have only 3 two-loss teams. All right, now let's take a look over at the SEC, the Southeastern Conference, the number 2 conference, although number 1 in terms of players getting arrested. Now, we see Texas has been getting a lot of preseason hype as the SEC favorite. They have a very, very tough schedule with 6 losable games. I'm predicting Texas will make the playoffs, but I also would not be shocked if they missed out, which is something Steve Sarkisian is good at. We have to see if the Longhorns fixed their running game, which was miserable last season. There's also some over the weekend saw some rumblings coming out of Austin that there's some dissatisfaction on the team. One of the players' parents posted a tweet on there saying that Sarkisian had lost the locker room. They also had to dismiss one of their starting linebackers for some undisclosed reasons. So there's a little bit going on in the behind the scenes there already in Austin that might indicate that Texas Tech is ready to collapse. So I might be right on the money when I say Texas Tech could be the big boy that is most likely to fail and miss the playoffs. But the key game for Texas is going to be that week 2 game when they host Ohio State. And here is my big prediction for the 2026 season. The loser of the Texas-Ohio game will slip all the way out of the playoffs. They each have very difficult conference schedules and cannot afford to drop a non-conference game. And right now, with the rumblings I'm hearing out of Austin, I don't think Texas is going to beat Ohio State. I'm going to put them on my list of teams to make the playoffs, but they're also going to be my team most likely to drop all the way out. Georgia is not as good as Texas, but they have a much easier schedule. Makes them a more likely bet to make the playoffs as long as they fix their anemic pass rush. They need a top-tier defense because their offense is a little underwhelming. They look especially thin at wide receiver. I don't think Alabama's a top 15 team, but they're the second most likely SC team to make the playoffs. They also have a pretty easy schedule. And this is as long as Keelan Russell lives up to his 5-star hype. If they, for some reason, have to go back to Austin Mack at quarterback, then this is not a playoff team. And Kalen DeBoer will need to start looking for a new job. I predict the 4th SEC team to make the playoffs will be Oklahoma once again, though this is dependent upon them beating Michigan in week 2. Oklahoma and Michigan are in the same boat as Texas and Ohio. They have very difficult conference schedules and cannot afford a non-conference loss. I'm picking Oklahoma over Michigan because until I see Bryce Underwood play well against a good team, I won't believe he can do it. Last year's SEC Cinderella Ole Miss, they're not like Indiana, who is a legit team on defense and can win big every year. I think Ole Miss is going to take a step back, despite the hometown courts allowing Trinidad Chambliss to play another year. He's not going to sneak up on anybody this year, and I do believe the Rebs are going to miss Lane Kiffin. Now, it's hard to forget how awful Texas A&M looked in their last 2 games in 2025. Makes you think their 11-0 start was a bit of a fluke. They do have a roster loaded with 4- and 5-star players, but I'm not a believer in their quarterback, Marcel Reed. He's the kind of dual threat guy who can rack up yards and points against the bottom feeders, but he looks terrible against the good teams. I also don't buy the LSU hype as a playoff team. They have a great secondary, but the rest of their position groups are not top tier. And Sam Levitt is coming back from an injury from what was already a disappointing start to the 2025 season. We got to wait and see if he can regain his 2024 form. Now, they always talk about how deep the SEC is, but the rest of this league is very mediocre. I don't see any of them as a dark horse pick to make the playoffs. Vanderbilt might be worth watching just to see their 5-star freshman QB Jared Curtis. Auburn is going to be North-South Florida with Alex Golesh and Byron Brown. He caused some headaches for Alabama a couple of years ago. It would be fun to see them do the same again this year. All right, so that'll just going to leave us now with the group of 6 in Notre Dame. Our ladies somehow rigged the playoff system, so if they finish in the top 12 of the CFP committee rankings, they automatically get in. Have you seen their schedule? It's not quite as soft as Texas Tech's, but at the absolute most they could lose is 2 games. And if they're 10-2, they're going to be in the top 12. There's no way the TV networks will allow the CFP to leave Notre Dame out this year. I picked Notre Dame as the most likely team to make the playoffs, even though they're not the best team, though I do believe they are one of the 12 best. I just don't see any way they can lose 3 games of their schedule. As for which group of 6 makes the playoffs, that's likely going to come from Navy, Boise State, Western Michigan, UNLV, and New Mexico. The big games on the G6 schedule are the Boise State Western Michigan game September 26th, Navy Notre Dame on Halloween, with the Navy upset giving them a huge advantage over the rest of the G6 field. And then there's the November 14th New Mexico UNLV game. I like New Mexico, especially if UNLV goes with Auburn and Oklahoma, 5-star flap Jackson Arnold as their QB. Although I just heard over the weekend New Mexico might have an injury problem with their quarterback, so that could dramatically tilt the odds in UNLV's favor. Alright, so now we're going to put up a graphic and show the 12 teams I think are most likely to make the playoffs. Number 1 is Notre Dame. They are guaranteed to make the playoffs if they finish in the top 12. It basically means all they need to do is finish 10-2, and looking at their schedule, besides Miami, who could beat them? USC drops off the schedule. The only other tough games look like BYU and SMU. Maybe one of them could pull an upset, but they're not going to lose both of those games. They're probably not going to lose either one of those games. I just don't see any way Notre Dame doesn't finish at least 10-2. The second team most likely to make the playoffs is Texas Tech. I don't see them losing any game. But the reason I don't have them as the team most likely to make the playoffs is because they could get upset in the Big Ten title game and blow their whole season. They could get left out of the playoffs as payback for the Sorsby fiasco. Third most likely team is Miami. They're going to easily win the ACC. Then I have Oregon as the most solid of the Big Ten teams, and they have a much easier schedule than Ohio and Indiana. I don't see any way Oregon can lose 3 games. Then we go to Georgia as the most likely of the SEC teams. They have the easiest schedule of any of the SEC contenders. If they get any type of pass rush this year, they shouldn't have any problem making the playoffs. Then I have Alabama with the second easiest schedule of the SEC contenders. Of course, as we said, that all depends on Keelan Russell. And then also for Alabama, similar to Texas, they have to improve their running game. It was almost non-existent at the end of last season. Next, I have Ohio State. The only reason I have them this low, they have a very difficult schedule. And if they do somehow lose the Week 2 game at Texas, they have very little margin of error for the rest of the season. They have games against Iowa, Indiana, USC, Oregon, and Michigan. If they lose to Texas, like I said earlier, whoever loses that Texas-Ohio game, that is the team that will drop all the way out of the playoffs. The loser of that game will be the most hyped preseason team to not make the playoffs. But right now, I got to lean toward Texas, especially with all the chaos apparently that's going on down there in Austin. So that's my big prediction for the 2026 college football season. Next, I got Indiana. The only reason I have them this low is I want to see if Josh Hoover cuts out the turnovers. Then we got Oklahoma and Texas. We already talked about Texas with that key Ohio game. I rank Oklahoma over Texas as it's more likely they win their game over Michigan than Texas beats Oklahoma or than Texas beats Ohio. I'm going to go with USC as the 4th Big Ten team. based on their relatively easy schedule and having their key game against Washington at home. And for my group of 6 pick, I'm going to go with Navy. Notre Dame is the only tough non-conference team they play. I think if they win their conference, they'll finish the year with only 2 losses. I think that would put them in ahead of Boise State because they would have played a better schedule, unless Boise State somehow shocks Oregon in their season opener. If they would somehow win that game, of course, they would be a lock to be the group of 6 playoff team, but I don't see that happening. Similar scenario for New Mexico. They would also have to have a shock upset win over Oklahoma in week 3. Otherwise, I think Navy's strength of schedule will bring them a higher ranking. Plus, as we said, apparently there might be some injury problem with the New Mexico quarterback. Well, that's my playoff picks. Get down in that comments field. Let me know. What do you think? Anybody you strongly disagree about? Anybody I'm overlooking? Just get down there and let me know where I'm way off base on, or if you think we hit it pretty good. All right. Also, we're going to put up our Heisman picks. If you think we're off base on any Heisman picks, let me know. So let's get to our Heisman prediction. We'll put up here our 5 predicted Heisman finalists. I think C.J. Carr is going to win the Heisman. He's got a very easy schedule to throw against. Notre Dame always gets a lot of hype. C.J. Carr is going to be a quarterback on a team that's going to be in the top 5 all year. And you're the grandson of a legendary coach. That sounds like a winning formula to me. His biggest threat is probably Dante Moore. He could put up some huge numbers at Oregon. And if he plays well in the marquee games against USC, Ohio State, and Michigan, he could sneak past Carr. Now, the last thing I want to put up my list of who I think are the 10 best coaches in college football. You'll probably notice some of the names I don't have on there. Ain't no Lincoln Riley, Dan Lanning, Kalen DeBoer, or Steve Sarkisian on there. What have they won? Kalen DeBoer loses 3 games a year at Alabama. That makes you a great coach? I think not. He took Washington to the CFP title game, but they got flattened by Michigan. Until Riley, Lanning, DeBoer, or Sarkisian win a title, I don't think you can consider them a top 10 coach because they're all coaching at schools where you're guaranteed 9 wins every year. Okay, that is it. That is going to conclude our 2026 college football preview. Remember, get down into that comments field. Let me know what you agree with, what you don't disagree with. We're going to be back in a few days with some more. God willing, we'll have our first week of the season. Our football picks against the spread. Help you win some money. Gambling away what little money y'all have. But until then, remember, enjoy the rest of your life.